With Cobra Kai as a series officially ending, but we all know that it never dies, I thought it was appropriate to go back and revisit the first season. I realized that since I started officially making content after the first 2 seasons, it's appropriate that I do an Easter eggs breakdown. So let's talk about what you missed in Cobra Kai Season 1. Spoiler, just kidding, this season's been out for almost 7 years. Let's break down the Easter eggs episode by episode. Ace Degenerate refers to what Tommy calls Johnny as the original Cobra Kais are introduced in the first Karate Kid film. It's also the name of the song in the first season soundtrack that plays as Johnny gets up and gets his day started, and the song's melody would become a leitmotif often associated with Lawrence in later episodes. The date, December 19th, 1984, is the date of the All Valley tournament where Johnny and Daniel fought each other in the finals. This date is known because it's on a poster on the wall of the original Cobra Kai dojo when Daniel and Miyagi visited said dojo together. In what would become a recurring technique used in subsequent seasons, we see some unused footage from the first film during the finals match, specifically different angles of the crane kick and Johnny taking the kick more dramatically. We see one of Johnny's trophies from a previous All Valley Championship victory in the closet, as before his fight with Daryl Vidal, he's stated to be a 2-time All Valley champion. As Miguel makes his first appearance, he wears a hoodie that's similar to Daniel's undershirt he wears when he learns to clip bonsai trees for the first time. The meeting between Diaz and Lawrence is very similar to the standoffish meeting that Daniel and Miyagi have for the first time, with both kids mentioning a problem with their sinks. Johnny also mistakes Miguel for being one of the members of the 80s boy band Menudo. Although the cars are similar in color, Lawrence drives a 91 Pontiac Firebird now instead of the 83 Avanti convertible he used to drive in the original film. As I mentioned before in my Why Johnny Lawrence is the Better Sensei video, Johnny is a handyman like Mr. Miyagi. At the mini-mart, when Lawrence asks Diaz what Nestor said about him in Spanish, this is a loose parallel of Ali translating Mr. Miyagi for the All Valley official. While unlikely to be a reference, when Johnny sits down, it reminds me of the classic Sad Keanu meme. Just like Daniel was back in 1984, Miguel runs into his own problems with a bully and his group of friends, even being shoved to the ground and shoved into Johnny's car. However, like the Halloween fight, Johnny takes the role of Miyagi and intervenes, soundly defeating Kyler and his gang in a similar fashion before the police arrive. Although Mr. Park tries to choke Johnny out, the latter throws him over the shoulder as Daniel did to Chosen in the Karate Kid Part 2 final fight. The following day, Lawrence refuses to teach Miguel karate at first, similar to how Mr. Miyagi first refused to teach Daniel. That night, Johnny watches one of his favorite movies, Iron Eagle, a film that was eventually overshadowed by Top Gun, as both released the same year, a metaphor that describes Johnny being upset by Daniel at the All Valley tournament, who uses that famous kick to this day in his marketing. We see some flashbacks to the first film as he's watching Iron Eagle, notably when he led the Cobra Kai dojo in class and when he fought Daryl Vidal in the semifinals in 1984. As Johnny decides to go for a drive, the shots of the car and the flashbacks are similar to the montage of Rocky driving at night in Rocky IV. We also see some more unused shots from the first film's final fight, notably when Johnny falls to the crane kick from different angles. As Lawrence pulls into the All Valley arena, he begins to drink like Mr. Miyagi to cope with his trauma as he remembers being choked out by his sensei John Kreese, as we saw in the Karate Kid Part 2. When Johnny arrives at LaRusso Auto, he notably wears sunglasses to disguise himself to avoid Daniel, the same thing Daniel did on the first day of school when he was trying to avoid Johnny. When the two finally meet, they briefly mention their scuffles at the beach and outside of the school. As Johnny realizes Sam is his rival's daughter, this is a similar moment that occurs in the first film when he realizes that the person that's with Daniel is the person who jumped him and his friends. We see another iconic moment recreated when Daniel gives Johnny the bonsai tree like Mr. Miyagi once gave him one. Sensei Lawrence pulls another Mr. Miyagi as he makes a pact with Miguel to teach him karate and busts out the trophies from his closet to display it in the dojo. As he paints Cobra Kai's famous creed on the wall, he notably steps on an advertisement of Daniel's dealership LaRusso Auto, and the episode ends as Johnny ties on his iconic headband. Episode 2's title, Strike First, of course refers to the first part of the mantra of Cobra Kai, and is also the name of the song that played when Johnny fought Kyler and his gang. It's also frequently played during the credits. In a role reversal from the first film where Johnny was a rich valley kid and Daniel was poor, Daniel now is wealthy and successful, owning a car dealership with multiple locations. As LaRusso realizes that Cobra Kai has reopened, he has some Karate Kid Part 3 PTSD-like flashbacks to the first film, specifically his dealings with Cobra Kai. At the end of the flashbacks, we also see an alternate angle where Johnny landed the first point, transitioning into the ending of Ain't That a Kick in the Head by Dean Martin, which I'm not even sure if they could have picked a funnier or more appropriate song for that moment. As I mentioned in one of my shorts, Johnny shouts, "Quiet!" just like Mr. Miyagi would shout. Sensei Lawrence continues to lay out the rules of the pact from the first episode like Mr. Miyagi did with Daniel, and delivers a similar monologue to what Kreese gave to the Cobra Kai dojo the day after the Halloween fight, even ending with, "What is the problem?" Johnny instructs Miguel to do 50 push-ups on his knuckles, giving him 10 less than what Kreese instructed a student to do that same day. The Encino Oaks Country Club makes a return, though the difference is, this time, Daniel and his family are members. When talking to Amanda, Daniel mentions his original hometown of Newark and how he had to play next to his Aunt Tessie's house, a character that Lucille mentioned in the first Karate Kid film. We see some more parallels to Daniel's training with Mr. Miyagi back at the Cobra Kai dojo. Miguel is cleaning the mats instead of cars, and Johnny tells him to give both sides and not to question his methods. We see it parallels to the beach party where Sam plays the role of Allie being eyed by her Daniel, Kyler in this case. After the party is broken up, Daniel exaggerates to Amanda that he was pushed off a cliff on his bike, when in reality he was pushed down a hill in the first film. As he's in the spare room, we see his 2 All Valley trophies and 2 articles, one showing a picture from the first film and the other from the third film. In the flashback, Daniel explains the rules of karate to Sam, just like Mr. Miyagi did to him after the Halloween fight, while also quoting the first rule of Miyagi-Do from Karate Kid Part 2. Back at the Cobra Kai dojo, when teaching Miguel about different strikes, Johnny says after the last one, "Obviously that's only for extreme situations," paraphrasing a quote that Terry Silver once told Daniel in Karate Kid Part 3, "Extreme situations require extreme measures." When Kyler is over at the LaRusso household for dinner, Daniel demonstrates to Kyler the unagi or unagi-ba that is used for cutting sashimi and serves a LaRusso Ponzu Toro. In the next Karate Kid, when Miyagi is driving Jolie to school, one of the foods that he offers to prepare for her is sashimi. This may be the same recipe he taught to Daniel later on, especially since all Miyagi were fishermen. It's also unclear when he mentions his last trip to Okinawa if he means Karate Kid Part 2 or a later trip that occurred before Season 1. Daniel asks Kyler about his black eye and hand, just like Mr. Miyagi asked Daniel the same thing as he was fixing their sink. Mr. Park also pulls a Johnny and omits details about what happened when he and his friends were jumped, which leads to Daniel confronting Johnny at the Cobra Kai dojo, just like Mr. Miyagi asked Kreese for his students to leave Daniel alone. When Miguel asks if there's a certain way his sensei wants him to wash the windows, Johnny is indifferent. This is a subtle nod to wax on, wax off. Finally, as Johnny and Daniel step on the mat, they stand on the same sides as they did back in 1984, something that happens frequently throughout later seasons as well. This could also be a nod to their first interaction on the beach before they first ever fought. Episode 3's title, Esqueleto, means skeleton in Spanish. It refers to the iconic costume that Johnny wore on Halloween that he lets Miguel borrow later in the episode. Carmen, Miguel's mother, is a single working mom just like Lucille LaRusso was in the first 3 films. As Johnny goes through his mail, he falls behind on his bills like Kreese did at the beginning of Karate Kid Part 3. Miguel asks, when am I going to learn how to kick, just like Daniel asked Miyagi when he was going to learn how to punch when they were training on the lake. As Amanda talks to Daniel, she mentions Louis, who we were introduced to in Ace Degenerate, is his cousin. He is the son of Daniel's uncle of the same name, who Lucille was taking care of in Karate Kid Part 3. Later, when Daniel explains to Amanda that he volunteered to chaperone the Halloween dance, he mentions that his mom drove him on dates, a nod to Daniel and Allie's date in the first film. Just like Mr. Miyagi, Johnny continues to train Miguel in unorthodox methods by tying his hands and throwing him in a pool. The two also exchange a notable quote that was introduced in Karate Kid Part 3, "Cobra Kai never dies." Although not exactly the Quicksilver method, Miguel manages to break 3 boards back to back that are placed at a similar height as Daniel did when he trained with Terry Silver. We get a Halloween dance like we did in the Karate Kid, and Miguel shows up in the classic skeleton costume that Johnny still had. Counselor Blatt mentions that she went to high school with Daniel and Allie as she talks about the two breaking up. We get another fight on Halloween, though this time, the teacher finds the student after the fact. Lastly, we see a photo of Allie that Johnny looks at in the display case. Episode 4's title, Cobra Kai Never Dies, as mentioned in the last episode breakdown, is a famous catchphrase that is first heard between Terry Silver and John Kreese in Karate Kid Part 3 before the latter goes to Tahiti. Robbie, Johnny's son, pulls off a Terry Silver con of his own by pretending to be someone he's not, even having his hair in a ponytail. After Johnny brings Miguel, he tells Carmen, "I shouldn't have gotten involved," similar to Mr. Miyagi telling Daniel, "For me, good idea, no get involved." Daniel calls out to Sam that the Bananarama chocolate chip pancakes are up. This is a reference to the pop group Bananarama, whose song Cruel Summer in the Karate Kid film plays during Daniel's first day of school. We're introduced to Daniel's dealership rival, Tom Cole, and though it's never proven, he could be related to District Attorney Mr. Cole, a character mentioned by Terry Silver's secretary, Margaret, in passing. At school, Miguel sports almost the same exact injuries, even wearing the same band-aid Daniel had after the Halloween fight. After the confrontation with Kyler, Brooks says, "Dude, I think he was gonna cry," similar to Tommy saying, "Let it go, I think he's gonna cry," in the original Karate Kid film. When being picked up from school, Miguel tells his mother, "I just want to go home," the same thing Daniel told his own mother after he threw away his bike. Robbie's mother, Shannon Keene, is introduced in this episode, who is played by Diora Baird. Diora and William Zabka previously played a couple in Hot Tub Time Machine. Although it's not exactly the same, Tom Cole mocking Daniel's karate gimmick is similar to the way Terry Silver mocked Mr. Miyagi before their fight. Episode 5's title, Counterbalance, refers to a term that means a weight that balances another weight. It could be a nod to one of Mr. Miyagi's lessons, balance, as Amanda tells Daniel he's been acting off later in the episode. It could also be a nod to Counterbalance Entertainment, the production company of the Big Three. During the episode's intro, we see a Rocky-esque Karate Kid Part 1 montage as Miguel begins to train harder. As the yoga class begins, the class engages in the Cobra pose, appropriately as the Cobra Kai title appears. Another detail that I mentioned in my Why Johnny Lawrence is the Better Sensei video is that Daniel begins to enact a Sato-like plan by raising the rent for Johnny's dojo, similar to how Mr. Miyagi's friend-turned-rival owned all of the village and was willing to destroy it to get Mr. Miyagi to fight. Amanda later calls this a convoluted plot, subtly describing what Terry Silver did to Daniel in Mr. Miyagi in Karate Kid Part 3. When Miguel tries to convince Johnny to let Aisha in, he says, "This isn't a knitting class, this is a dojo," paraphrasing what Kreese told Mr. Miyagi. Later, right before the cafeteria fight, Miguel inserts himself into the situation like Daniel did with Johnny and Allie, though this time he wins the fight. He is later gifted Johnny's original gi that he wore in 1984. Although this is purely speculation and not proven, many believe that the bonsai tree in front of Mr. Miyagi's tombstone is the same one Daniel uprooted and later replanted from Devil's Cauldron. On the tombstone itself, Mr. Miyagi's time in the 442nd is honored as Daniel finds out that he served in the army in the original film. Daniel clips the bonsai just like Mr. Miyagi taught him, and we flash back to his teacher's lesson about balance, as the show is also creating a very similar shot of Daniel sitting in the car. The picture that LaRusso puts up of his mentor is likely a behind-the-scenes shot of Pat Morita as Mr. Miyagi from the next Karate Kid, specifically the scene where Julie Pierce sees him meditating. One of the shorts I previously uploaded talks about a similar music cue where Robbie again puts on a facade and enacts a Terry Silver-like ploy to get hired by LaRusso Auto, as the song Miyagi-Do, which is playing in the background, quotes the melody of Terry Sneaks In from the Karate Kid Part 3 soundtrack. As we see in the last scene of the episode, the picture of Daniel and Mr. Miyagi is from the ending of Karate Kid Part 3, and he finally puts on his iconic headband. A fun fact about this is that this is not a replica. This is the original headband Ralph Macchio wore in the original film, and it has been kept this entire time. Finally, it's revealed that Daniel is wearing his gi once again as he performs the Miyagi-Do kata. The episode is dedicated to Pat Morita's memory, as we see a behind-the-scenes photo likely from when Ralph and Pat were filming the kata scene in Karate Kid 3. Episode 6 title Quiver refers to an obsolete definition, which is a group of cobras. It's also the name of the song that plays during the final part of the episode and is a leitmotif that is typically associated with Johnny or his students, notably Hawk. The episode opens with a flashback of a younger Johnny in 1979 wearing the Walkman he would later wear while decorating the gym for the Halloween dance and at the dance itself. We see him observing two bikers and wearing their jackets, with the show implying that Johnny would later have both of these things in the first film, as he got the inspiration from these bikers. We also see him discover the Cobra Kai dojo for the first time, as we hear audio from the first film where Sensei Kreese is teaching his class, both when Daniel visits the dojo for the first time and visits again with Miyagi after the Halloween fight. When Daniel tries to recruit Anthony to train with him, he instead wants to play Tekken 6 on his Vita, as he's apparently a martial law main. Johnny takes a page out of Kreese's book after he takes Dimitri down and does a fake-out punch to him. The following day at school, Dimitri points out to Miguel that no one is going to mess with him, not even Kyler, as his bully is now trying to avoid him, just as Daniel initially avoided Johnny. When Daniel calms Robbie down after he starts the car in the showroom, he responds to Keen's statement about him being rich by paraphrasing Miyagi's, "Not everything is what it seems." Eli takes on a new identity with Hawk, which could likely be a reference to Wu Ping, the semi-finalist from the Karate Kid 2010, who even does the same hair flick that Hawk later does in Season 5. Lastly, the episode ends with Johnny parodying Kreese's "Fear, pain, and defeat does not exist in this dojo" speech. Episode 7's title, All Valley, refers to the infamous tournament in which many great fighters have taken part, including both Johnny and Daniel, Mike Barnes, Daryl Vidal, and Bobby Brown. It also references the subject matter of this episode, where Johnny tries to convince Daniel and the rest of the board to reverse the lifetime ban on Cobra Kai. Daniel begins to train Robbie at the dealership through unorthodox muscle memory methods, just as his sensei taught him, with Daniel Sees the Bird from the Karate Kid soundtrack playing in the background, which the song itself plays when Daniel witnesses Mr. Miyagi practicing the crane technique on the beach. The homage to the first film's training continues when Daniel asks Robbie both lots, a parallel to Miyagi asking Daniel if he painted both sides of the fence. Robbie nearly mimics Daniel's frustration, down to calling it bullshit and that he's just doing chores right before the lessons come together. In that scene at the LaRusso household, we hear an excerpt from Daniel's moment of truth from the first film, which plays when Daniel gets into the crane stance in the All Valley Finals, as Robbie tests out his reflexes with Daniel and realizes he was being taught muscle memory. As Johnny is flipping through the pages of a martial arts magazine, he sees an advertisement for the All Valley Tournament, which is a modern recreation of the poster we saw in the first film. We see a callback to Ace Degenerate, as Robbie also likes ketchup, just like his father. At school, Miguel waits for Sam to ask her out on a date, similar to how Daniel waits for Allie to come out of class to talk to her. Amanda brings up the bonsai shop, Mr. Miyagi's Little Trees, that he and Daniel tried to run in the 80s, where the latter talks about bad luck, alluding to Terry Silver and Mike Barnes. As Daniel is teaching Robbie how to trim the bonsai, he tells him to close his eyes and to think of only the tree, the same technique Miyagi taught him on how to trim the bonsai. LaRusso brings up another lesson about strong roots, something he learned from his sensei in The Karate Kid Part 3. Johnny Lawrence himself also brings up another Miyagi-ism when he gives Miguel dating advice. He states that strike first, strike hard is not just for karate, but for everything. Paraphrasing Miyagi's lesson of balance is not just for karate only, but for whole life. We get a shot-for-shot parallel when Miguel and Sam arrive at Golf and Stuff, as the scene opens up just like the first movie did. Young Hearts by Commuter plays, which is the same song that plays when Daniel goes to make up with Allie. We see a montage of Miguel and Sam doing the same things that Allie and Daniel did on their first date at Golf and Stuff too. As the All Valley Committee meeting is underway, they discuss changing the colors of the classic red mats as seen in the 84 and 85 All Valley tournaments. When Robbie faces off against Trey and Cruz, he uses two notable Miyagi-Do techniques, the drum technique against Trey, and he redirects Cruz into Trey as Mr. Miyagi did against the men at the gas station in the next Karate Kid. Miguel and Sam take photo booth pictures just like Daniel and Ali did as well, paying more homage to the original film. During Johnny's appeal hearing to the All Valley Committee, George reveals that the 1985 All Valley Committee issued a lifetime ban on Cobra Kai due to the unethical and unsportsmanlike conduct shown by senseis Terry Silver and John Kreese and their student Mike Barnes, which was the last time the dojo had a notable presence in the valley. Johnny states that his former sensei is dead, though Daniel doesn't buy this, and for good reason. This was the same story that Silver used back in 1985. After the date, Miguel rides his bike to the dojo, just like Daniel would on his way to training, and Diaz and Lawrence share a celebratory toast on their victories, a nice parallel to the scene where Daniel and Miyagi share a drink. Episode 8's title, Molting, refers to the process where a snake, in this case a cobra, sheds its outer layer of skin. This refers to Miguel eventually going down the darker path of the Cobra Kai philosophy. At the beginning of the episode, Lucille LaRusso returns, not having been seen since The Karate Kid Part 3. As she sees Daniel, she says, "There are those baby browns," the same thing she called her son's eyes when he was trying to cover his black eye. Johnny tells Miguel, "Save some for the tournament," paraphrasing Pat Johnson in the original films, "Save it for the ring," and Snake's "Save it for the tournament." As Sensei Lawrence recalls how he met Allie, he mentions Rocky III and states that the black headband he got was a gift from her. He also begins to tell his side of the story, though omitting details, and recounts the events of the first film. Later on, Johnny mounts his TV on the wall, just as he did for Judy in Ace Degenerate. He also catches the ending part of Iron Eagle on TV, as it cuts to Robbie and Daniel training to the song Training Hard, which plays when Daniel practices the crane on the beach. Notably, Robbie learns the Miyagi-Do kata and is shown how to punch, down to Daniel wearing an umpire suit as Miyagi did. We also get another Karate Kid 2010 reference where Robbie says he feels like Jackie Chan. Sensei LaRusso states that there's always another lesson to be learned, something he made up on the fly, a nod to Mr. Miyagi saying New Okinawa saying in Karate Kid Part 2. In the movie theater, we see Hawk throwing candy just like Dutch used to, according to Johnny. Robbie finding his balance on a tree is a nod to Daniel balancing on the bow of the boat in the original film. Sid greets Johnny by calling him the Karate King, similar to Daniel calling Johnny King Karate. Near the end of the episode, Miguel sees Sam and Robbie from afar, assuming the worst, just like Johnny saw Daniel and Ali from afar in the original film. As Lawrence hears a commotion outside his window and confronts Louis, this plays out similar to Karate Kid Part 2. In that film, it was Sato and Chosen making noise, with Sato saying to leave Miyagi a message, and in the present day, Louis says, consider this a message from Daniel LaRusso. Finally, Louis also calls his friends Sons of Anarchy, a nod to the Outlaw Motorcycle Club show. Episode 9's title, Different But Same, is what Mr. Miyagi described a picture of Daniel and Ali in the original film. It also refers to the episode's subject matter. Despite having differences, LaRusso and Lawrence aren't all that different. At the beginning of the episode, Robbie practices his balance with a two-legged kick at the skate park, similar to how Daniel practiced his balance with the crane kick on the beach. Johnny tells Daniel that he can't leave well enough alone, the same thing he told LaRusso in '84 when they caught up to him on the night of the Halloween dance. As the situation escalates, the two get into their fighting stances just like they did on the beach. To make up for what Louis did to Johnny, Daniel takes his rival to the trade-in lot and says, choose, recreating Mr. Miyagi gifting him a car for his birthday. As the two are on a test drive, Johnny says, relax Danielle, the nickname Dutch called LaRusso right before the '84 All-Valley tournament. They eventually make their way to the South Seas apartment complex where we get some flashbacks with the pool actually having water this time. Johnny mentions the Halloween fight, though Daniel retorts, how'd that end up for you? As the two break the ice with drinks later on in the episode, they talk about the country club incident, and Daniel remarks how he heard Ali hit Johnny as Susan told him at golf and stuff. The Cobra Kai gang throws a lake party, similar to Daniel attending the beach party at the start of the original film. This also plays out like the original film, though Miguel is already at the party when the misunderstanding occurs, and after shoving Robbie like Johnny shoved Daniel, a difference occurs when the Ali of the situation, Sam, is the one that gets hurt. Near the end of the episode, Daniel agrees to spar with Johnny one more time like the Rocky III ending. However, this comes crashing down when Johnny realizes Daniel was training Robbie, and LaRusso, due to the events of Karate Kid Part 3, thinks that this is an elaborate scheme. Episode 10's title, Mercy, refers to what Johnny later realizes that Cobra Kai needs and what Miguel lacks near the end of the tournament. As the tournament is being set up, we learn it is the 50th anniversary, and they have a board set up where it shows the final bracket of the tournament, similar to the '84 and '85 All-Valley tournaments. Daryl's change did get approved, no more red mats but blue mats with gold fists. Hawk tells Miguel to save some for the tournament, again a nice nod to Karate Kid and Karate Kid Part 3. Bert tells Aisha that he was buying a carton of milk, similar to how Kyler lied to Daniel about buying protein bars in Strike First. When Johnny teaches them the lesson of no mercy, he talks about his past, namely losing Ali to Daniel from his perspective, and his car being set on fire, which the former Miguel relates to because of his perception of Robbie and Sam at the lake party. When Daniel arrives at the arena, he sees a picture of him doing the crane kick from the first film. Miguel leads his team with the Cobra Kai chant, though this is different from the '84 Cobra Kai's chant, which is Cobra Kai, win or die. Miguel's very first attack is the crane kick, similar to how Terry Silver mocked it in Karate Kid Part 3. Johnny encourages Bert by raising his fist, similar to how Kreese did the same thing to Bobby in 1984. Speaking of that tournament, two Cobra Kai students in the current day, Miguel and Hawk, make it to the semifinals like Cobra Kai students Johnny and Bobby did. Xander Stone, being the former All-Valley champion that makes it to the semis against his Johnny, so to speak, would make him this tournament's Daryl Vidal. As we learn later in the series, he was also a former All-Valley champion. Before Diaz's match with Stone, he and Hawk do a Cobra Kai fist bump, similar to Johnny and Dutch doing the same before the latter's match with Daniel. Miguel even manages to defeat Xander by scoring the final point the same way his sensei did against Daryl Vidal in 1984. Unfortunately, history repeats itself again as a Cobra Kai student gets himself disqualified by injuring someone from Miyagi-Do. As Daniel talks to Robbie, we hear a leitmotif from the first film's soundtrack, Fish and Train, as the scene mirrors Mr. Miyagi talking to Daniel when he was injured. When Johnny walks through the halls, he sees a picture of his former sensei, Kreese, from the first film. LaRusso tries to do the Miyagi-Do heat massage, but realizes he can't and calls for a medic. We get another callback to the first film. Daryl states, "This is the moment we've been waiting for," and Daniel LaRusso is going to coach, similar to the '84 announcer saying that Daniel LaRusso is going to fight, and how he also said, "This is the moment we've been waiting for." As Diaz and Keen get into their stances, Miguel's notably mirrors that of Mike Barnes' stance from Karate Kid Part 3. Like in 1984, Miyagi-Do scores the first point. Robbie manages to pull off the two-legged kick like Daniel did with the crane, though doesn't win the match with the point he scored. We see some flashbacks as Diaz is warned for unsportsmanlike contact in a parallel to the sweep the leg scene, though Miguel is the one to say no mercy, while Johnny tries to advise him from fighting without honor. Diaz targets his opponent's injury, something his sensei did in 1984, and wins the match as the hero, though it is a hollow victory for Johnny. Lawrence and LaRusso briefly converse after the match again, with Johnny again holding the trophy. Back to the LaRusso household, Sam shakes off the rust like her father did at the end of Counterbalance. Daniel takes Robbie to the original Miyagi-Do dojo, where we see Daniel's old car, and the lights come on, similar to how Miyagi turned the lights on when he was listening to Daniel complain about his training. The season ends in suspense as John Kreese makes his return, showing that he's alive and well. I'm going to do something a little different and give you my initial thoughts at the time of Cobra Kai's release on YouTube in 2018. I've made it known before that I was not a die-hard Karate Kid fan at the time, but I would always watch the movies as they came on back in the day on TV. I also was hesitant with the trailer's initial release, but I was happily proven wrong as the show was so addicting. The combination of drama and comedy, or a dramedy as some people would describe it, just worked, and I loved how they wrote a lot of the characters with gray areas as opposed to the sometimes black and white writing of the 80s. It also made me go back and watch the original movies in a new light, and since then, I've been hooked. I think what makes this first season so special is that, like the first movie, it's sincere, it's relatable, and it's funny. I actually made it a mission to show this series to my friends at the time, and they all enjoyed it. Because of how grounded the first season is, I think that's why people like it so much. And little did we know, that was only the beginning. If you feel like continuing your stroll down memory lane, check out some of these other videos as well.